Phew. Oh, that's a great way to start the show. Sorry. So, everything looks like it's running. We got that good. We'll see how long the camera lasts today, although I've had the AC on since yesterday. Those of you who were in yesterday's Irregulars Patreon show will know that I had not yet turned on the air conditioning and it was getting quite warm here. And the camera was, well, I don't think it was the camera's fault. It was something down the road from the camera, whether it was the whatever adapter thing from Elgato or whether it was the program itself, the software, but the video was locking up and then I would restart it a little bit and it was fine. And until towards the last quarter of the live show, it was just a podcast with me with a goofy look on my face and it was frozen. So I've had the AC on. It's a good deal cooler. We'll see how it works out. Just not 100% sure that starting with a sneeze is a great omen. Let's see. Who have we got in the chat today? We've got Good Evening and Too Hot from Gothenburg, Sweden. We've got Belgium, Poland, Australia. Greetings from the Heathrow Terminal 5. Got my portable nerding kit packed and will be painting up some Tau while I'm abroad in Chile. Well, that'd be kind of cool. Wargaming Lobby says, greetings from Japan and welcome back. Thanks for having me. Yes, it's been 3 weeks. It's been a lot of stuff going on, and that's what we'll be talking about at some point today. Baton Rouge, Munich, Germany, San Antonio, Louisville, Kentucky, Penns Grove, New Jersey. Let me see here. We've got New Haven, Connecticut, Belfast, Ireland. Hello from Italy. Iowa, Oklahoma, Delaware, Corpus Christi, Texas. Weirdly sunny Wales. Yeah. It's actually pretty cloudy here today. I think it's going to storm some. David Cooper says, hey, from Ireland, do you have an address I could send fan mail? Thanks in advance. I do. Where is it? Boom. There we go. Tabletop Minions, 2080 West 9th Avenue, number 331. Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 54904. If you're interested in sending something, you don't have to, but it's lovely. Let me see here. Richmond, Ohio, Milan. It's Milan, Illinois. Or, well, maybe it is Italy. I'm not sure, actually. Maybe I don't know if there's a Milan, Illinois or not. We've got Edmonton, Louisville. Hello from Wisconsin temporarily. That's fun. Hello from New York. France. What else have we got? Blistering hot desert of Arizona. Yeah, I bet it's hot. When I was in Canada last weekend, I was there with Wargamer Girl, and she's from Albuquerque. And when she got back, she posted a picture on Facebook that she was happy because it finally started getting warm there, and it was like 100. And I was like, well, that's not necessary, I don't think. But, if you live there, that's probably what you're looking for, I guess. West Michigan, Monmouthshire. I'm probably messing that one up, sorry. Tater Tot says, good morning from West Bend. It was great meeting you at TMX. Absolutely. Chattanooga, Plymouth, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Not New Carolina. That's a different thing altogether. Denmark, Midland, Texas, Columbus, Ohio. I was just in Columbus, Ohio at the Origins. Scotland, Monza, Italy, Toronto, Nova Scotia. I was just in Canada. BJ Morph asks, yeah, Adam, how was dinner with Sam and Vince? So Vince Venturola, he's a YouTuber as well. If you guys don't follow him, you should, because he's a good guy. He lives in kind of actually right around Columbus area, and very good painter. He and Sam are part of a group that are working on a Warlord Titan, which is big, like $2,000 Forge World model, and they are working with a bunch of other folks as well, and they're going to be painting it up, and it's going to be raffled off at Nova Open. So Vince was, for work, going to be kind of in the Midwest anyway, so he just then, after he got done with work with that stuff, then he drove up here and so he and Sam are at Sam's house, and they've been painting on this Warlord all weekend long, and they did a stream on Sam's Twitch yesterday afternoon that it went for a long time, and they had a lot of fun, and a lot of people were there and stuff and everything like that. I poked my head in towards the beginning part. But yeah, it was, and then afterwards I drove to Appleton, which is where Sam lives. I live near there. And so yeah, I went there and then had dinner with the two of those guys. We went to this place. It's kind of a cool, like, underground brew pub. And when I say underground, I don't mean like, it's literally like, you go down and it's all stone under there. It's really cool. And yeah, we had a great time. We talked about lots of things and had a really great time. So yeah, it was really good to see Vince. I had just seen him at Origins as well. Met and had dinner with him and his wife. But yeah, I always like hanging out with those folks. So it was a good time. What else have we got? The Canadian Barbarian asks, I have a question. Does contrast paints work on gesso primer? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if anybody has actually attacked that particular issue. I've not used gesso primer in quite some time. I mean, I would assume it kind of depends on your particular definition of works. Contrast paints, from what I can tell, they usually say, oh, you should really have more of like a satin kind of primer, but I've also used them on a matte primer a little bit in some of my testing, my initial testing, and I think that they work fine that way too. I've almost found that they don't flow completely south and then just all of the paint kind of gathers around the ankles like it sometimes does with when you put on too much. But yeah, so yeah, it's I don't know. That's a good question. I guess it depends on the gesso. The gesso primer generally is not too chalky, I would hope. So yeah, that's a different story too. Yeah, that'd be something to test. Unfortunately, the only gesso that I have is black, so I don't want to probably use. You don't want to use contrast over black. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Let's see. Welcome back from Southern Germany. Greetings from St. John, New Brunswick. Good morning from Central Texas. Spending the morning kitten proofing my hobby space. That's not easy, especially with kittens. If it's like cat, that's a slightly different story. But kittens, as my wife and I believe, are always drunk, and so having kittens in the house would be like having a tiny little drunk person with claws in the house all the time. So every cat that we have picked up from the shelter has always been at least a year and a half. Kittens go just fine, at the shelter. We like to go with the slightly older cats because they are sometimes a little bit harder to move. So that's what we do. But like really old cats, that's actually my wife's parents have older cats that they get from the shelter, like when they're 13, 14 and all that kind of stuff. And that's a nice thing to do as well. And also they're generally a lot more chill, let's just say that. DJ Todd P. Harris says, sorry I missed you at Origins. I just returned from the Dominican Republic. Last time I let the wife plan our vacations. Well, I mean, if it's just a timing thing, you can, I don't know about the Dominican Republic, if it's a bad place to go for a vacation. I suppose it depends on where you go in the Dominican Republic. But Origins was a lot of fun. Yeah, so it was a good time. What else? Did you celebrate Warhammer Day yesterday? No, I guess. Because technically I did do some painting, but I was painting some Star Wars Legion Stormtroopers, which is not Warhammer, technically. I wanted to there was a small part of me that wanted to go to the closest Warhammer store to me, which is still a good hour drive away. Camera's already starting to... Okay, that's going to be fun. I'm just going to blow on it. Maybe that'll help. But yeah, I didn't go because I had a live show to do in the afternoon for the Patreon folks, and then I had a bunch of painting to do and stuff like that, so I didn't. And then I went and saw some friends and just a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I did not get a chance to do that. Jake Red Fox says, Loved the video you did with MiniWarGaming. Very informational for a new Kill Team player. Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. No, that was a lot of fun. What do you call it? Battle report with Matt was a lot of fun to do. We did two actually. There's that one, and then there's one in the vault is what they call it. It's kind of their kind of paywall thing, and so yeah, did that. A lot of fun. Matt's a fun guy to play with, and so I was glad to be able to do that. And I enjoyed playing the games, and I did. Spoiler alert, I did sort of okay, so that's not too bad either. Let me see here. Trey says, drunk kittens can confirm. Bloodthirsty and drunk. Yeah, I can. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're awesome when you go to the shelter and you watch them through the little windows and they're running around and being crazy. That's a lot of fun. But then we don't. If we're there to get a cat, we don't bring it home. We get one that's less drunk. Yeah. DJ Todd P. Harris asks, what are your thoughts on the monoprice resin printer compared to the Ender Creality 3, deciding on which one to purchase? I know a bunch of people with Ender Creality 3s that like them quite a bit. Resin printers are obviously generally higher res and all that kind of stuff. I would do a bunch of research on the monoprice resin printer just to find out how badly it smells. Cheaper resin printers... and I don't know why. Like, if you buy a Form 2 resin printer, which I have not, but I have thought about from time to time, I've got a friend, well, you probably know him as well. He's a Patreon supporter. He's an irregular. He's also a YouTuber. His name is Mac the Maker. He's frequently in this show. He's got his own YouTube channel and Facebook and all that stuff. Mac the Maker, you should check him out. He has access to lots of different printers through his day job. And so... he kind of gives me the 411 frequently on like, yeah, this one is, good, and this one's not good. And so far, a lot of the inexpensive resin printers, your Anycubic Photon and stuff like that, the one downside to them is that the resin is absolutely terrible smelling. And that's a problem. Also a problem, my camera has locked up. Well, it's not the camera per se. All right, this is already, we're 13 minutes in? So that's fun. Let's see if we can fix this. No? Cool. It's not that cold, or it's not that warm in here, so I don't know what the hell is going on with the camera here. That's a great look. So let me see here if I can unplug it and plug it back in. Is that going to work? No? Okay. Can you guys hear me at least? Or is it completely froze out? Anybody? It seems as if it's the software. I swear, I don't understand what the problem is here. Anyway, yeah, so do some research and find out how badly it smells. Unless you live in a place where it doesn't get cold and you can keep it in like the garage or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so you guys can still hear me, so that's something at least. I don't know why this damn thing doesn't want to... it's just locked up, and I can't figure out why. If I unplug that, what's that going to do? Let me try unplugging this. Okay, that's cool. And then plugging that in. And now do we get anything? No? Hey, there we go. Oh, this is going to be this will be a hoot. All right, so where are we at? Okay. Different plastics smell different, change materials maybe. I know that for certain printers the resin is like, I don't want to say matched, but they're like, well, this one works best. This one is kind of the one you should be using, whatever. And that's kind of a problem, you know what I mean? So if it's a really smelly one, that's the one that's best matched to that printer, well, then you're kind of boned. But I would do a bunch of research around and try to figure that out a little bit. Yeah, so let me see here. People talking about the new Form 3 that's coming out soon. The XL is one. Looks like it's going to be close to $6,000. I mean, the Form 3s, well, the Form 2 is an amazing printer. I mean, I've seen this stuff close up. It's just astounding, but yeah, it's also very costly. But the resin's not smelly, so there's that. Like they have a deal right now, or not a deal. They have a package right now with the what do you call it? The Form 2, where you get the Form 2, you get the alcohol bath washing thingy, and you also get the UV curing chamber or whatever, and the whole package is like $4,500, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, you really better be doing something. If you're just doing it because you want to make like terrain, or you want to do it just because you want to print out some, kobolds for your D&D campaign, you're either wicked rich, or else you're not great at, return on investment kind of analysis, which I'm not going to lie. There's times that I'm not great about return on investment analysis. So I'm not throwing shade. Take my word for that. Fumbledore says, "Hey, first time live watching you." Well, I appreciate it, and welcome. Normally, not so many technical difficulties. It's been the last couple of days. I don't know if it's the computer. I don't know if it's the doohickey. I think I might just go out and order a capture card and use that instead of this little Camlink dongle and see how that works out. I'm going to do a little research this afternoon, and we'll go from there. What else? People talking about 3D printers a bit. Too humid to use spray primer. Any suggestions? The downside is that if it's too humid, like, you don't want to generally use it in the house because it smells really bad. If it's too humid, you can easily get very, very dusty, kind of chunky primer, and that's also bad. You don't want that because then you end up either having to try to strip it. Some people in the chat yesterday, or sorry, no, that wasn't the chat yesterday. So actually, some people on Facebook yesterday in a thing I was reading were saying if you get real dusty, powdery kind of primer on your model, they will sometimes take an old toothbrush and just brush it off, not wet, just dry. Just try to see, if you can dislodge a bunch of that kind of chunky, dusty stuff. I've not tried that, but I probably ought to. I'm assuming then you maybe are less primed than you ought to be, but we'll see. But yeah, so I'm looking into, that kind of stuff. In that situation, I think that your best bet is if you've got a humidity issue, you may want to look into getting an airbrush. I know there are packages that are not that expensive. I mean, I just actually saw one on Amazon that was a compressor and an airbrush it was like $90 American. So in that sort of situation, you could buy something, and if you're just going to basically be using it for priming, it doesn't have to be a great airbrush. If you wanted to eventually start getting into more base coating and highlighting and detail and things like that, then you want better stuff. But if you just basically live in an area of the country, like I do, that it's just difficult to prime half or more of the year, then it's probably not a bad idea to look into getting an airbrush. Definitely. Lee Huntington says, "Is that a scared alien in the background?" It is not. That is Nick Raimondo, and he is I don't want to say a co-host because he doesn't ever say anything back there, but he just kind of sits back there and hangs out. For those of you new, that's actually my wife's cello case, and it usually sits there anyway, but it didn't used to have the googly eyes until VJ Morph here in the chat actually sent the googly eyes, and now and then the name came up, and it's a whole thing. But yeah. Dave's, I can't pronounce the rest of that. Dave's Cezio Ebios 3. Hey, I've not caught the live show in a while. Funny is that I just got done seeing you and Matt from MiniWarGaming play some kill team matches. Yeah, that was I was just talking about that. That's a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun to do. King Cool says, "Nice show with Uncle Adam while I'm building my magnetized Deathwatch kill team for Kill Team." Well, there you go. Corvus says, oh no, Corvus was not responding to me. He was responding to someone else. But it's good to see Corvus Games Train here in the chat talking about 3D printer stuff. There's your expert, or at least one of them. Let's see here. Cobra J says, "As much as I want to stay, I'll be off to bed. Leaving in aviation, or being in aviation, being tired isn't really an option. Good to have you back." Well, I'm glad to be back, and you don't want to be tired when you're doing aviation. I get that. That makes sense. 12 Neef says, "Good morning." Good morning. Llama Juice says, "I'm in Georgia. Humidity is always a problem." Yeah. Like in Wisconsin, it's not a problem in the winter, but then it's cold, so there's that. But in the summer, we don't. I mean, we're not as humid as you guys usually down there. But yeah, definitely. Let's see here. Airbrush is great, especially if you're obsessive about hitting every little spot in the Mini. That's also true. Also, it uses far less paint than rattle can. When you're using a rattle can, so much of the spray is going everywhere but your models. It's going on the cardboard thing that you get the models sitting on outside in the driveway, at least if you're me. And yeah, so going for primer, really, for airbrush primer, because you can just use a little bit and just, get it up underneath it a little. And yeah, it's really, I prefer doing it. With terrain, I do generally prefer using rattle can because it's so big, especially if it's like I would have never used airbrush to prime the Realm of Battle boards that I own, because that's a 2 foot by 2 foot. Each of those tiles is 2 foot by 2 foot. That would have not worked with airbrush. I mean, you could do it, but it would take forever. So in those sort of situations, I do prefer the spray cans. Alex says, thinking of starting an orc kill team with mainly Gretchen and a couple of maybe Ludas and Commandos. Any thoughts? Is that a little too out there? Gretchen are, well, you're going to bump up against a limit in that you can only have 20 models total in your roster. Well, at least definitely in your team, you can only have, that's actually out on the board, you can only have max 20 models. So if you go with a bunch of Gretchens, you are not going to hit points. You can get close, but I like Gretchens. They're honestly best if you can use them, the best use for Gretchen so far that I've found is I need to hold that objective and it's behind this thing and I don't want to send a guy who can fight over there. I'll just send a guy over there who can kind of stand next to it. So in those situations, it's great. I also have a Gretchen leader, which means I just hide him someplace and he just gives me an extra command point every turn. The problem is that now with elites, you can now come in on reserves from other angles. So now you've got people who, instead of having to fight their way all the way across the board to get to your leader and kill him, can now come in from the back sometimes. So you have to be concerned about that. So yeah. Ryan McCormick says, I got my wife to play Shadespire last week by showing her that Skaven exists. She loves rats. She beat me in our first game and is now showing interest in painting. Well, that's cool. That's a good way to do it, Bradshaw Blues says, hey, Uncle Adam, have you seen the new GW Apocalypse game? Is there something you'd be interested in alongside Kill Team? So I got a copy of the Apocalypse box. What day is today? Sunday? I got that Thursday. And I'm probably going to make a video for it, I think next week, talking about it. I was not originally planning on doing anything like that because it's not... Generally, Apocalypse is designed for people who have a lot of models and who've been playing 40K for a while. Now, they've changed things drastically from what I can see, but it's still, if you've just gotten into Kill Team, Apocalypse is not where you want to go next. That is not step 2. That being said, I have had a couple of people ask me about it who are newer wargamers, including my boss at work who's been getting into Kill Team. He's building an orc Kill Team, but it's his second miniature game ever. His first miniature game is actually Shattered Crown by Gaddis Games, which is alternate history World War II. Anyway, so he's working on these guys, and he started asking me about Apocalypse. He's like, so is this a different game or is this a new, what do you got to do? And so if there's confusion about it amongst the folks who are newer to the hobby, then I kind of want to make a video about it. So that'll probably be Friday's video, actually, will be that. But otherwise, I haven't looked through it as much as I would like yet, so I'm hoping to be able to do that more between now and then. But yeah, they sent me a copy of it. Like I said, I think I got it Thursday, FedEx or whatever. And I mean, it's just basically, it's a big box. It's got a lot of cards in it. It's got a bunch of dice, tokens. It's pretty much about it. It doesn't come with any models or anything like that. So what else have we got? J Solo Art says, good morning, just waking up and enjoying the show from Hudson, Illinois. Well, cool. Fire Ant Farm asks, Uncle Adam, I just got a bunch of the table tiles from Secret Weapon. I like those in the recent sale. I was trying to figure out how much spray primer it's going to take. What was your experience? So I painted 6 of those? Yeah, I painted 6 of them. So I made a, what do you call it? I made a 24 by 36 board of them for Kill Team. And they are... I primed them, I think black. Black or gray. I think it was black, and then I painted them gray after that. And I did use rattle can. I mean, I didn't use a full can. I mean, they're small. I mean, 1 foot by 1 foot's a different story. When I originally did my desert themed, like the original Realm of Battle board, you know, the one with the like the crack in the earth and there's just all skulls in there. When I bought that years and years and years ago, I like asked everybody for my birthday, instead of giving me presents, just give me money, and I was going to put it towards this thing, and I bought this big honking thing. And then I painted it predominantly all with Krylon camo color, because I wanted one of the desert colors, because I wanted to make it desert. I didn't want to have to put in flock and all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed it. It's a great board. It works out real well. All that being said, it probably took those 6 2 foot by 2 foots probably took me 3 cans probably of that Krylon stuff. So 6 1 foot by 1 foots, I would be surprised if you went through an entire can priming it. Just let's just say, because like I said, I just did it recently, but I can't remember. I think I might have started with a can that was like half empty, and then I finished it and then started another can, but I'm pretty sure I did not do a full can on that. John Russell says, is primer in a rattle can actually different from, say, a base paint? Some kind of chemical property that makes it adhere to raw plastic better? Somewhat, and I don't know the full science behind it. Very frequently when I use a primer, especially on plastic, it's not even technically a primer. What I do instead is I use like a Krylon camouflage, because they have fusion technology. That's the brand name that they put in it. Rust-Oleum's camo paints also say bonds to plastic. Basically, it's just something that allows it to stick to plastic better. But I've also used that same camo stuff on metal too, and it works just fine. I've also used normal primer. I've used what's his name, the Army Painter colored primer, things like that. I used some of the primer from the new contrast line, and used some of that on some test models I was working on. But it does generally bond a little bit better, and then it also has a slightly better surface usually for the paint to adhere to. So it's about being able to stick to the model, but it's also about getting the paint to stick to the primer. That's kind of what the primer does. If you use a super glossy kind of primer, it'll have it much like your paint will like move around a little bit more sometimes. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if people start using things like really glossy primers and then using contrast paints, and then they'll just like flow like crazy. I think it'll maybe flow a little bit more than a person might want. Yeah, so it depends. Oh, it's locked up again. Sorry. Gonna do this again real quick. See, the problem is when I look at the camera, the little screen on the camera doesn't lock up. So I know it's not the camera's fault. It's something else. It's the cam link. There we go. Okay, well, this will be me rebooting it over and over and over again, so that'll be a lot of fun. All right. What else? Rabbit Burner says that the Necron Outrider detachment might make my Necron army more competitive. If you're talking about in Apocalypse, yeah, that's very possible. That's true. Cam Patrick says, good day, Uncle Adam, watching from Australia, a few wines deep. Any experience with clear plastic primers? I'm really happy with one I've purchased or used lately. I've never used a clear primer. I mean, I've used clear varnishes after you're done, painting, and use it to like, sort of like, fix things. I noticed that the video is locked up again, so that's awesome. But yeah, I've never used a clear primer. Then I would assume in that situation you would then see, the stuff. Now, see, this is interesting. I honestly wonder if it's not the software a little bit. Well, I don't know. Something's changed. I used to be able to turn things on and off. Oh, no, it's on that side. Oh, they moved it. That's why I can't do it. All right, well, hang on. See, those used to be over. Never mind. You guys can't see what I'm doing. If I do this. No? What if I do this? No? Does that do anything? No? Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay, let's see. Then I just do this again. Driver updates are important too. No, you're right. And I have updated my drivers. I did that actually just recently. And there we go. That's awesome. So yeah, just unplugging and replugging. Yeah, definitely going to buy something new. All right. I did look like I was pensively paused there. That's true. I've had much worse lockup faces there, so that's a lot of fun. Let me see here. Leslie Schaefer says, that's not to me actually, but make sure you use relatively new milliput. You'll get bad results otherwise. That's a good piece of advice. Old milliput does not work real well. If you've had like some milliput sitting in your cupboard or basement or whatever for quite some time, you're like, oh, I'm going to use a project with it. And it may not work so hot. I've had actually that problem. Jez Hunt says, who makes an actual matte brush-on varnish? They all seem all satin. Tried AK, tried Vallejo, tried Army Painter. The AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, I'm super happy with. So if you've tried that and it's not to your liking, then I'm not sure what next to tell you. But the Ultra Matte Varnish from AK Interactive, I love through my airbrush. And even with a brush, just putting it on that way, it works out real nice too. So yeah, that's a good question. Otherwise, I have not, like, dull coat. You can get dull coat in a glass bottle, but then you have to get like a special thinner, and it's a whole thing. I've never messed with it. So yeah, if the cam link feels warm, which that's the thing, it doesn't feel warm at all. So I don't know what the issue is. I just assumed yesterday because it was hot in here that was some sort of issue. I don't know. I mean, like, it says that my GPU is at 33% usage. It says that my processors are, my total CPU load is at 30. The CPU load that's being used by XSplit is 18%. So, like, my computer's not, being overheated or overworked. It's just being wackadoo. I'll have to get something new. That's fine. J Solo Art says, stopped by Flying Phoenix Games a few weeks back, picked up some Scions and Raven Guard box set, and saw Sam's display booth. Owner's wife was there working. Nice store. Yeah, so that's my local store that I go to. And you're right, there's a case there that's got a bunch of Sam's work in it that's really nice. Phoenix Ignite. Since your journal video, I started trying one. I decided to use an app-based one because, like you, my phone is always around and my hobby area moves. What stats do you track? What app do you use? I use something called Evernote, which is not particularly a tracking, time tracking software or anything. It's just where I keep all of my notes. Like when I come up with an idea for a video, I put it in there. When I come up for an idea for a t-shirt, I put it in there. Whatever I've got to keep track of and hold on to, I like Evernote because I can access it through the web. I can access it through my phone. It's cloud-based. If my phone falls in the toilet or whatever, nowadays the newer phones are kind of technically sort of water resistant at the very least, so it's probably not a problem unless there's things going on in the toilet. But that's a different story. My point is that if you lose your phone or it falls in the river or something like that, then you don't lose all your data, at least in Evernote, because it's on the cloud. And so I've been putting my recipes and stuff like that in there for a long time. And then I've also been, now for the last several months, been tracking time. The thing that I follow the most, the thing I talk about, or I keep track of, is like, again, I like kind of estimate in my head, I think it'll take this long to do this project. And then I do the project and look at it and go, wow, I was way off. Or, oh, I was pretty close. And that, I think, is interesting for a bunch of different reasons. One of the big reasons is that it's just useful for finding out, like if I ever wanted to start painting for other people, or if you just have like a deadline, being able to find that information. Also, there's times you're sort of fooling yourself when you're kind of like, yeah, no, I'll whip this out this weekend, it'll be great. And then you're like, oh, actually, it didn't turn out at all. So yeah, it depends. Let's see here. Paul Hadley says, Tamaya Flat Clear is a good matte finish. Just don't thin it too far or it goes to a gloss shine. I've seen that kind of thing too. If you start to thin, like, the thing about matte varnish is that it is a special kind of animal. Like if you're using a matte spray, if you put on too much matte spray, it will become less matte. But you still want to use the varnish to, like protect paint. So some people will paint like with a less matte varnish and put it on not thick but thicker, and then throw a good matte varnish over the top of it. But then just spritz it just a little bit, because more and more and more of the matte varnish that gets on the model, the less of it can do its matte thing. It just kind of clogs. I don't want to say clogs up, but it makes too much of the surface, and then it's science, I guess. I've always been told, and I've found this to be true, using less matte varnish makes it more matte, whereas if you keep putting on more and more of it, you will get less matte. So there's that. That rhymes. Let's see here. VJ Morph's got a question. Adam, can we hear details of the MiniWarGaming opening weekend, please? I think I will probably do that. I'll probably go in reverse if I can. So, or should I go in order? Maybe I will go in order. So 3 weeks ago, speaking of VJ Morph, we had the Tabletop Minions Expo. It was on the 8th and 9th of June here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And it was a small little kind of gaming convention, tabletop wargaming and all that kind of stuff. And it's designed so that people come and you don't have to like bring your army. It's not a tournament or anything like that. You come and you play, you learn games you've never played before. You meet a lot of people, and it's kind of like a party. It's real small. It was like 70-ish people there this year. And it's a 2-day thing. People came from all over. VJ Morph came from, and his friend came from Australia. Useful G, and he and his partner came from overseas in the UK. People came from West Coast, East Coast, all kinds of places. South, Noob Painter came from Texas again this year. So it was a lot of fun, and it was kind of just a 2-day kind of you get together, party, play games, have a good time. Sam stopped by a couple of times, and he had his contrast paints already, because he was in the videos and all that stuff, so they'd sent him that jazz, and so he did that stuff. He was painting. He and his girlfriend were painting Zombicide, because they both love that game, and so he was just doing zombie skin. Had just a ton of these models and was just like blurp 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 doing some zombie skin and talking to people and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. On Saturday night, we went out to a bunch of us after the thing, because the facility closes like at 10, and then a bunch of us went out to a local bar, and there was a band, which was fine, but we just had a good time and had some drinks. Moderator Matt was there, talking about Rec Age and stuff and all that stuff. Gaddis Gaming was there as a vendor as well and was selling that stuff. It was a lot of fun. It's a neat little kind of mini kind of convention, and a lot of people got to meet people that they've only talked to online and all that kind of stuff, and so that was a great time. And so it was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to already getting next year set up and all that. So I got to play some Blitz Bowl, and Blitz Bowl is basically like a slightly simpler version of Blood Bowl. It's made by Games Workshop, but you can only get it through like Barnes and Noble. Like they don't sell it, I don't think, through their store, unless their web store or anything like that, unless they've changed things. But they should sell it, because it gets you to buy models. Like you're generally only playing with like, it comes in the box with 6 humans and 6 orcs, so it's far fewer models than normal Blood Bowl. And it's also a different style of game. It's on a smaller board, and it's more of like, as a person who doesn't understand rugby, it reminds me more of rugby, because it's just all over the place, back and forth. Blood Bowl is all about, I want to get down to this end zone and score, and then you come back and score, and we just keep doing that. In this, the scoring is much more about, you have these cards that you pull randomly, and then it's like, well, if you tackle 2 people, you get 2 points, and that's like an objective. So you do that, and you get to take that card, and you get to keep it, And so it's not so much about I only can score through making touchdowns. It's more about I can do other things, but I can also score by making touchdowns. So it's a lot of fun. So it was a good time, and I hope that everybody that came had a good time. Meat Jelly was the name of the band that we saw. You can, I think, check them out technically on YouTube. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great time, and I was really glad that everybody was able to come and meet each other and hang out and everything and all that stuff. So it was cool. Then I got done with that, and that was on Sunday. And then on Thursday, what the heck day? Wednesday? I don't know. It was only a couple of days, and then I had to go to Columbus. So Columbus, Ohio, is where they hold Origins. Now, Origins is a gaming convention, but it is an overall tabletop gaming convention. So it's board games, it's RPGs, it's collectible card games, CCGs, and also miniatures. Now, the majority of it is board gaming, and then RPGs, and then some CCGs. And then wargaming is kind of at the bottom, which is the way the tabletop industry seems to work. If you like through GameFor, through the app, that we've developed at work, we've discovered, although I knew this already, that of the overall tabletop gaming genre, like you've got board gaming is huge right now. RPGs are big and have been getting bigger because of the quality of 5th edition D&D. Like, it's been selling really well. It's been, like, in comparison to 4th edition D&D, which was not so great, it's really been doing well, and it's been really making a resurgence in role playing. So that's been great. And then you get into like your collectible card games and stuff like that. Magic has its ups and downs. There's Pokemon. There's a couple others, but it's mostly Magic. And then there's the industry that we're mostly interested in. But there's still, I think, a lot of benefit as a wargamer only to to something like that. Origins is still pretty cool. There's like a lot of stuff that was going on in one of the halls. That's where the majority of all the miniature stuff was. And there was Kings of War, there was Gaslands, there was Kill Team, there was a bunch of weird made-up kind of different games and things like that. Like, that's one of the things that's cool about conventions, is that when you go to a convention, you will more often than not come across a game either you've never played before or no one's ever played before, because it's been made up. It's like house rules. There's a group of folks from Ottawa called the Ottawa Red Shirts, and they are like a demo team, and they go to conventions and run things. And over the years, they've basically like they make this thing called D12 Monster Mash, which is just this huge board with all these like pre-painted old D&D models and stuff like that, those kind of rubbery ones that Wizards of the Coast did about 10, 15 years ago. They still have a huge collection of those, and they just have this giant dungeon, and just like 10, 15 people can play at once, and you're all standing around this huge table, and it's always kind of like a big spectacle and really interesting. There was a couple different big Gaslands boards that were like big spectacles with just crazy hills and mountains and all kinds of neat stuff like that. But yeah, so that was kind of cool. But I was mainly there to talk to people and to talk to some companies and things like that. But I also was there because I was working for so WizKids and Vallejo have a booth kind of together, because WizKids and Vallejo have a partnership. If you've seen any of those new WizKids unpainted like D&D or Pathfinder models, they are all primed with Vallejo, is what it says on the package. So they've got this kind of partnership. Last year at Origins, they had this thing where they worked with this guy named Jason from Realmsmith TV. And I just lost my camera again. Oh, and it came back. I didn't have to touch it. Real interesting. Anyway, so I worked with this guy from Realmsmith, which is a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel, and it mainly focuses on RPGs and things like that. Anyway, so last year he was running these painting classes where you could pay like $20, and then you would get a beholder model, and then you would get to sit down and paint your beholder model along with Jason, who's got like a camera and a big screen behind him, and he's like, all right, well, now we're gonna paint the eyeballs and that kind of stuff. And then he always had a guest with him. Well, I got to be one of the guests in one of those 2-hour kind of snippets. So that was last year. This year, he reached out to me. We were talking at a convention in a distributor conference, actually, in Madison. And he was like, would you be interested in actually just running one of those every day? Not Sunday, because there was only 2 on Sunday. But there's like 3 of those things, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So he was like, if you could do the 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock one on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, that would be great. And then it would allow him to go get lunch and like go and talk to people and do stuff and business development or whatever, that kind of stuff, see the show. So I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I got to sit there, and that's what this is here. I'm kind of sitting in the middle of the vendor hall, and I've got, you can't see in this shot, way over on the left side over there, that's where you can see the close-up TV that's showing this little camera that's on an arm that's real close to my, what I'm painting there. And I don't know if any of you got to see any of the streams. Some of them were on YouTube, some of them were on Twitch. I kind of hopped around depending on the day. One of them, the audio didn't work at all for some reason, so that was a lot of fun too. Streaming from like conventions is always a cluster. So yeah. Anyway, it was very cool though. It was a lot of fun, and I had like I think 40 people in front of me generally, like that had paid to get in there, and they were sold out. The first day I painted a hill giant from WizKids. Second day was stone giant, and third day, Saturday, was a triceratops, and all those were a lot of fun. So that was a big thing that I got to do there too, and just talk to people and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great time. Got to go to some, I don't want to say industry parties, but I got to go to like an industry party sort of. There's a big podcast in board gaming called The Secret Cabal, and through people that I know, through Dice Tower, or sorry, not Dice Tower, I apologize, through Board Game Geek. Chaz used to work for Dice Tower, now he works for Board Game Geek. But my friend Chaz Marler was like, hey, you should come to this thing, we're getting together at this place. And so got to talk to a lot of different people and stuff like that, talked about GameFor a lot, things like that. It was very cool. And then on Sunday morning, actually even, talking about Board Game Geek, I got to, every day of the convention at Origins, they do a live morning show from like 9:30 Eastern until like 10. And on Sunday, it's usually Chaz and Marty. And Marty's from the Rolling Dice Taking Names podcast. But Marty couldn't be there on Sunday because he was flying back home. So Chaz was like, do you want to be on the show? So I got to be on the Board Game Geek Twitch stream on Sunday morning as a co-host. It was me and Chaz, and then Rodney, who's also on Board Game Geek from Watch It Played. Or I may have no, I think it's Watch It Played. I'd have to double check. I can't remember the name of it. There's like 3 or 4 different channels that I watch sometimes that I'm like, and Rodney, I know Rodney, but anyway. So it's a good convention. It's about a third the size of Gen Con. It's about 20,000 people instead of 60,000 people. But there's some benefit to that, I think, just because it's not so huge and overwhelming, which is nice. There we go. All right. Now we get into what's the next thing? Let me just hit the chat real quick to make sure, see what's going on here. People talking about the new Sisters of Battle model. VJ Morph says, yeah, my attempt to stream at TMX didn't really work out, not due to technical issues, more due to hangover issues. Yeah, that happens. Running paint demos is fun. I did one earlier this spring, says JP Got Rockets. Cool. Let me see here. What else? VJ Morph says, Adam can hear Emily in the background. Please say hi for the irregulars. The irregulars say hi, dear. If there was like a weird sort of crackling noise maybe or something, that's probably just our old wooden floors. Emily was walking back and forth to the kitchen, and so that sometimes makes that noise, which is fine. Every once in a while I can hear Diesel walking on the hardwood because he's a bit of a tubbo, but also because our floors are very, very creaky, which like is... I honestly, there's something really nice about heavy creaking floors because you can be laying in bed at night and you know that no one's sneaking up on you because you would hear them, you know. So that's a benefit. Anyway, and then I came home from Columbus. I was home for almost a week, maybe, almost. And then I flew to Buffalo, New York, and then rented a car, which was a problem. I had already reserved the car and everything, but I still had to wait 2 hours for them to finally get me a car, which was a whole thing. But then I did finally get to drive across the border for the first time ever, and leave the country for the first time ever, and go to our sister from the north. Is that anyway? Canada. And so I went to Welland, Ontario, which is where MiniWarGaming is from. If you guys have not heard of MiniWarGaming, then you should check them out. They are the biggest wargaming YouTube channel on the entire platform, all of YouTube, which means the entire world. Yeah, so I had been invited back in April, I think, to their grand opening, and they wanted to, have me there for the grand opening, and so they've, with a partner, kind of an investor partner, they bought this building. So they've been in this other building for quite some time, renting this other building. That's a big kind of not big office building, but an office building with several other offices in it besides their own, and they wanted something bigger and something that had a little bit more their design. So they bought this building, spent a bunch of money to refurbish it, make it look amazing. If you haven't watched Friday's video, you should do that this past Friday. I talk about like the grand opening. I show you a little bit of like the rooms and stuff like that and everything, and then I interview both Matt and Dave for a good long time. That place is pretty amazing. So I get there on Friday night, and there's like a patio area kind of in the back, and I get in there, and all the mini wargaming folks are there, obviously. 40K couple are there. Wargamer girl and her husband are there. Aaron from Cool Guys Nation, War Boss Doug from Table War, Phil, the Glacial Geek, was there, and probably a whole bunch of other people that I'm missing. But we had a great time and sat around and had some beverages and talked and all that kind of stuff. And then later after that, because I got there probably around 8 o'clock, 8:30 on Friday night, and then after that later on we went into the house or into the building or whatever, and then we just hung out and like we're talking, and then we started playing Werewolf, another game that I can't remember the name of now, but it was like kind of one of those sort of party game sort of things. We were doing that. And then I got to stay in the Orc Hut. So there's one of the cool things about this place, besides the super cool looking studios that they've built and all that stuff that you've probably seen in some of the videos recently that you've been watching. And there are new offices and a tournament center, and they've got a store in there and everything. The second floor of the building is all rooms. So if you travel from far, far away, like people have been doing for years, to come and be in a battle report at the Mini Wargaming bunker, instead of having to stay in some random hotel nearby, and you can still do that if you want, but now you can also stay in the facility, and the rooms are all themed. So I stayed in the Orc Hut, and again, go back and watch Friday's video because there's a lot of footage of the Orc Hut. And actually the Orc Hut is it's a lot of recycled stuff, scenery from the old Orc studio. So a lot of that same stuff they've just taken and put it now into this room. But there's also a room called the Bunker, which has got like 4 bunk beds. Well, technically 2 bunk beds, but with 2 bunks. And it's got like a very Imperial Guard vibe to it. There's a big room that's got like a queen bed, and that's called I forget what it's called. Anyway, something Imperial, of course. And there's also a Mortal Realms room, which has got like a thing. There's a room called the Fang. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. You can stay in these cool rooms that are like themed, and there's a separate exit. So like you're not like staying like locked into the office at night overnight. There's a separate exit, and everything. You can go up the upstairs. But it's a super fun kind of place. Saturday was the big ribbon cutting, and the mayor came, and a whole bunch of people came. They were giving tours all day. This orc band called the Goth Rockers, which if you've ever been to a Adepticon, you've probably seen them. They dress up like orcs and play metal, and they were there, and there was cake and cupcakes and all kinds of crazy shenanigans and whatever. And then I think in the evening after that, a bunch of us, like after everybody left, we went to Dave's. Or was that on Sunday night? I don't remember anymore now. But there was one night we went to Dave's house and hung out in his backyard and ate pizza and hung out and talked to a bunch of folks. There was also 3 guys from another channel called For Whom the Dice Tolls, or is it For Whom the Dice Rolls? I think it's probably more rolls. So yeah, they were there as well. Taylor and Dan and Tim, I think. I'm terrible with names, so I apologize in advance. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. So, and then on Sunday, I think is when, or was it Monday? No, it was Monday when I filmed my battle report with Matt. It was also interesting to be there during the week and just like watch like all the people there and see just like all the stuff that they're doing like on a normal weekday to like create the content and do all the stuff that they do and everything. I filmed with Miranda, Mini Wargaming or Wargamer Girl, Miranda and Aaron from Cool Guys Nation, and some other people like including Table War Doug and Phil from the Glacial Geek, and Dave, of course. We did also another video you should check out called Life of a Wargamer. That one turned out to be a lot of fun. No script, basically, just sort of like wing it. And no, not even like a treatment, not even like a plan, really. It just, we started with a kind of an idea, and then it just sort of morphed and went from there, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah, so that was fun. And then after we got done filming that, like at nearly 1 a.m, we then did a live stream on Twitch called The Shrine of Chaos, which is Dave's, normal Twitch kind of live stream, and did that and gave away prizes at, in the middle of the night. So it was just kind of like crazy fun and really interesting to see sort of like how the sausage is made to some degree, like what's behind the scenes there. And then, like I said, I also got to do some interviews with those two guys. I had these questions, and I asked them both the same questions so that you could kind of see how they both think. In some situations, they sync up, and some things that the answers are wildly different. And you can really see, I think, a lot about the personalities of those two guys because of that and why they work well together. So that was really cool. But yeah, so I let's see, Tuesday I flew back. Well, I had to drive back across the border and all that jazz and whatnot, and then flew back out of Buffalo, and then for some reason flew to Atlanta. Like I knew that was going to happen. It wasn't like a trick, but it's a strange thing to go that far south and then have to go way back up to Wisconsin, but that's the flight. So it actually turned out relatively well. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a great time. I was really glad to be there for the grand opening. It was very cool. I do hope to go back someday and maybe do some more videos there or visit again and that kind of stuff. It was cool, though, yeah. But that was my last 3 weeks in a nutshell. It's been stressful. It's been fun. It's been tiring. But now this month, coming into July, I'm not really going anywhere till the last day of July. 31st of July, I'm getting in the car, driving to Milwaukee, and parking my car at a friend's house, and then we're taking his car over across town to another guy's house and parking that car. It's a thing. And then we're getting in a minivan and we're driving to Indianapolis for Gen Con. So technically, I am traveling just the tiniest little bit at the very end of July, but otherwise it's pretty much home, which is going to be nice. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, let me see. There's a lot of conversation going on here in the chat. I like to see that. Wubda says, would you make a playlist of all your appearances? Yeah, that's maybe not a terrible idea. I'll have to look and see if I can do that. Yeah, I don't... let's see what else here. Wargamer Girl, she's cool, says Samuel. That's true, she is. VJ Morph says, yeah, the shrine with all you guys was great. You were probably one of the few people that was awake. I mean, there was 200 or 300 people watching, but because of the time, most of the people in my section of the world were probably asleep. But in your section of the world, it was probably about a great time for that. Probably afternoonish, I would think. Aaron Blankenship asks, I heard mention of you doing a battle report with MiniWarGaming. Will that be posted to YouTube? If so, when? It already is, actually. It was posted yesterday. I think it was posted yesterday. Yesterday or late Friday. It's a beat mat bat rep kill team, and it's Death Guard versus Black Templar. He played Death Guard, and I played Black Templar. What happened was, when we did the battle reports, I brought my 6 kill teams with me to Canada, because they're small and they don't take up a ton of space. And then we rolled randomly a d6 to see which army each of us was going to play. So in the first one, which is out on YouTube, he got Death Guard and I got mostly Primaris Black Templar, although there's a couple of scouts in there, a scout sniper and a regular scout in the roster. But in the actual game, I only used the scout sniper. I didn't use the regular scout in my actual list, my actual kill team. And then the other second one that we did is in the vault, so it's behind the paywall thing. And that one is, I had Imperial Guard and he had Death Watch. And that was also a really fun game too. So, Gesundheit. So yeah, it was. It's kind of a like they all almost always do that. I guess with battle reports, they always film two. So there's one out there for the public on YouTube, and then there's one that's in the vault, which is one of the benefits of having the vault membership and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. We really had a good time. Snowfight says, Gen Con, baby, fun times. Yeah, I am looking forward to Gen Con. Actually, I'm already trying to figure out what to do for a meetup. The last 2 years, the meetup has always been at Potbelly Sandwiches because I really like Potbelly Sandwiches. So we might still do that again. I'm trying to figure out schedule because this year at Gen Con, I'm teaching 3 seminars. And I'm also going to 2 different events, like in the evening, something I think on Thursday and something on Saturday. So I think it might have to be Friday night, but I got to double check. So yeah, those are things that are coming up, and it's amazing to me that it's like a month away. That's crazy. So yeah. Fuji Heavy says, first time catching you live. Thanks for the top work. What's the best way to remove a mold line I missed before primer? Before primer, or do you mean after primer? If there's a mold line that you've missed it and you find it before you primed, then the best way is to go back and not miss it. You know what I mean? Like go back and scrape it off. If you've primed it, oh, I see how you're saying. I think I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is that you missed it before you put the primer on, and now you've put the primer on. Gotcha. That makes sense. Honestly, one of the best ways is probably to actually just go back and try to scrape it off and then try to put a little brush on primer there. And one of the things that you see in a lot of situations like that, actually I think Vince did a video about that, about using brush on matte varnish. So like you go back and maybe scrape that mold line off and now you've got like no primer there, but you just throw in a little brush on matte varnish there, and then it still gives something for the paint to stick to. Now if you are doing something, let's say the contrast paints where they're very, very transparent like that and the primer color is super important, then scrape that mold line and then just go back, because they sell little pots of paint that match up their spray cans. So you go back either and throw the gray sear or the Wraithbone on it. But if you've been using some other kind of primer, like just straight up white primer, scrape that thing off and then throw a little bit of white on top of it. And then maybe throw a little bit of matte varnish on top of that just to help it give it that surface that the paint sticks to better, and then do your base coat. That's probably the best way to do it. Let's see. Frankie Lee, no, that's answering somebody else. Does anyone have any experience with macro lenses and painting miniatures? I do. Are you talking about like to film it or to see or to take pictures? Macro lenses is the closer and closer and closer you get, the shallower the depth of field is. So sometimes a shallow depth of field is something that you like. Like in the image that you're watching here, most times when you see somebody talking in a live stream, you see them in focus and you see Nick in focus and these things back there and all that stuff in focus. And that's because those tiny little cameras have just because of the way they're built, they have a tendency to get everything in focus, which is generally a benefit. It's an artistic choice and sometimes a pain in the butt, as you've been noticing in today's video. But it's an artistic choice for me to use a different type of camera, which allows me to have this kind of separation between me in focus and the background not in focus. But there are things that you do to make this happen, right? Like you have to open up the aperture in your lens more to make this happen. If you keep closing the aperture in your lens, then the depth of field, like what's not in focus and what is, just keeps getting wider and wider and wider. The closer you get to something too in focus, like the closer and closer and closer the lens it gets, that depth of field gets shallower and things get blurry and fuzzy behind it, which is why a lot of times, and I've been trying to fix this, in some of my videos when I'm trying to show you something I'm painting, if I don't bring it back down in front of that second camera in exactly the same spot, moving it even a couple inches one direction or the other will knock it out of focus, because the focus is so shallow that it's right here. So macro lenses are great for getting super close on models like that if you want to take pictures and things like that. But if you're taking still pictures, you're going to want to put it on a tripod, and you're going to want to probably make the hole in the lens, the aperture that lets in the light, really small. When you do that, then you have to keep the shutter open longer to let in more light. So it's this constant, like, if I want this to happen, I have to make this concession over here and vice versa in photography. So you either have to add a lot more light to the scene, or you have to make it so the shutter stays open longer, and then you can't like touch the camera while you're doing it, and it's a whole thing. Taking normal pictures of your miniatures, like I did a video years ago about taking better pictures of your miniatures with your cell phone. That's not super hard. Getting a fancy camera and a tripod and trying to get like really, really good high-end photos of miniatures is actually a good deal more difficult, but not impossible, obviously. Anyway, let me see here. What else have we got? Aberrant. I prime black rattle can, but I have a bottle of black Vallejo primer to brush on if I miss a mold line and need to scrape it off for some reason, or I missed a spot when priming. Really helpful. I agree. Yeah, that is a good idea. That kind of stuff is very useful in those situations. Aberrant says that I think Vince said use varnish to fill in small gaps. That's also true. It's good for small gaps, but I know he was also trying to use it to kind of hide mold lines a little bit too as well. So you can kind of get out of both those. Let's see here. Vanguard asks, any experience with airbrush varnishing? I do have experience. I'm considering one of the cheap siphon feed airbrushes for varnishing and maybe priming, since they clog less and are easier to clean. The issue with siphon feed airbrushes in what we do is that you have to crank the pressure up a lot higher, because a siphon, to make it actually, like the air has to blow across, and then it actually has to blow hard enough to actually suck up the stuff from underneath in the bottle and then make it come out the front of the airbrush. Whereas a gravity feed airbrush, the reservoir of the fluid is up above, and then it actually just drops down in front of the airstream and gets fired out the thing. So you can use much lower pressure to do that. Generally in miniatures, you almost never use siphon feed. So, give it a try, but you may find that it doesn't work as well as you would like. So yeah, that's definitely a thing there. Yeah, but it's not generally siphon feed is, like you see people, one of the big benefits to siphon feed is the ability to switch colors very quickly. If you see like airbrush t-shirt painters in the mall, they have a bunch of these bottles, then they just snap onto the bottom, and they blow out the last color until they start getting the new color, and then they just go and start painting and all that stuff, and then they just pop that thing off, pop the new color on, blow it out until you're getting the new color, and then go like that. And that's the quick and easy way. With miniatures, because I'm generally shooting at like 15 psi, and siphon feed at 15 psi is going to be spotty, I think, because you can't really pull up enough of the fluid that way. You usually have to crank it up higher. So I don't know. I'm not sure that it would work super hot for varnish. I could be wrong, but I've always done it that way. Let's see here. John Ashley Smith says, trick to spot mold lines when you think you are done. Hold Mini up to light, paying attention to where mold line was. If you see the line shadow, more cleanup is in order. Yeah. Always, if this is your model here, you always want to look at it. What I do is I have a tendency to look at it from multiple angles. Like I know roughly where the mold line was, and I look at it from this way, and then I look at it from this way. And if the light's coming from above, which is where my light's coming from, you may not see the mold line here, but when you flip it this way, all of a sudden now the shadow is much more visible and you can see the mold line. So looking at your models always just one way is never good. Like when I was doing those classes at Origins, and teaching people about painting, like one of the first things I was showing them was, as you were working on your model, constantly flip it upside down and look at it from different angles, especially when you're trying to cover everything up with a base coat. When you're trying to cover up a base coat, like those models from WizKids use this real light gray primer. So when you're going through and trying to put on your base coat color, and it's a Triceratops, and you're going to go through and paint it all brown. Well, if you're just holding it one way and painting it, you can easily miss little nooks and crannies. And if the primer is black and you're painting a dark color, it's not that big of a deal. But if the primer is real light gray and you're painting a dark color, then there's a lot more contrast between the primer color and your paint. So always taking it, flipping it upside down and right side up and all that kind of stuff, looking at it from another angle, all of a sudden you're like, oh geez, I missed under his little weird Triceratops armpit, and then you fill that part in. So that's also very useful for finding mold lines. And again, like you're saying, holding it one way, you might not see the mold line. Flipping it the other direction, it now casts a shadow, and that's when you can find it a little bit easier. So yeah, definitely. Let me see here. Boop boop ba-doo. Is that a Dark Angel? Well, he might have been at one point. He was a test model I was working on. He's got a bit of a skirt, so he might be a Dark Angel. But I wasn't painting him that way. Juan asks, "How do you know for sure what's your airbrush PSA or PSI?" So generally, a decent compressor. Well, some compressors will have the pressure gauge and the dial on them. Other ones, it'll be a compressor that and it will say it has a range between X and Y psi. And then you buy an external little doohickey that you either clamp onto the side. Mine is attached actually to my airbrush table. So my compressor has a hose that goes to this extra thing that sits on that clamps onto the side of my airbrush table that has a little gauge that tells me what my psi is and a turning knob thing so I can turn it up or turn it down. And then that thing that's clamped on the side of the table, that's the hose then that goes to my airbrush. So if you don't have a regulator, I think a pressure regulator is probably what it's called, if I had to guess. If you don't have a pressure regulator on your airbrush compressor or between your airbrush and your compressor, then you have no idea of like what your actual PSI is and you can't adjust things. So getting a pressure regulator is a really good idea. You can usually, the same place that you bought your airbrush from will probably either have pressure regulators. Some compressors have pressure regulators built in, some don't. I think that when I first bought my very first compressor, I bought it from the not the grocery store, the hardware store, and it was like this red, like garage type compressor, and it worked fine. It was just really loud. It had a tank, so it would fill up the tank, and then it would shut off, and then you'd be spraying for a while, and you get to the point where you'd lessen the tank to the point where it hit the threshold, and then it would kick in and make fill up the tank again, and it would scare the pants off me. But yeah, that thing had a built-in regulator. A normal airbrush compressor, very frequently they kind of don't. So then you have to have a regulator between the compressor and the brush. That's basically about it. But that's how you know how to, and then you can adjust things and whatever. Corvus Games Terrain says, Adam, are you still looking for Kroot models? I have a few extra carnivores that I got on eBay. No, actually, I've got all my Kroots ready to go. Well, I mean, I've got them all bought, and now they're in a box. So when I get to that point on that project, I'll have them all done. So yeah. Justin says, I bought my miniature 9 years ago, but only be able to start painting this year thanks to your videos. Thank you for your encouragement. Well, I'm glad it's helping. I'm always glad to hear that the stuff that I can do here, my goofy videos and stuff, can actually encourage and help people get to the point where they start painting. I say it all the time. I really think that the hobby of miniature painting itself is a great hobby because it's very meditative, it's stress relieving. You're focusing on this one thing and working on painting these little dudes or whatever, and you can listen to like an audiobook or a podcast or something like that while you're doing it, or music, or maybe you watch Netflix. I can't watch stuff because then I don't paint, I just watch. But yeah, I think it's a great hobby, and I think more people could use a hobby like that as opposed to hobbies that are either more passive or hobbies that can cause stress sometimes. Yeah, so I'm glad that you're getting into it, and I'm glad that I was able to help. VJ Morph came back to Australia to 2 Kickstarters delivered. Skull Tales Full Sail has arrived with over 100 minis. So much work to do. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I've been trying to stay away from Kickstarters on some situations. I did. Let's see. The only Kickstarters I've done recently are I did the Hellboy Kickstarter, so that's a lot of miniatures, but that's the only one this year that I've done like that. The other Kickstarter that I did recently was for a game, sci-fi skirmish game called Zone Raiders that doesn't have any miniatures. That's we've made the rules, you figure out what kind of miniatures you might want to use, which I kind of like that because it gives me more creativity to be able to do cool stuff, and I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, that's the only 2 Kickstarters that I can think of so far this year. Well, no, that's not true. I did do a terrain Kickstarter, but it was all pre-painted, so I didn't have to paint anything. It's not here yet, but it'll come soon. But yeah, that's that through Monster Fight Club. I bought some of their cool trees, and all that kind of stuff. I've showed pictures, I think, on the thing. Wargaming Lobby says, I'm actually building my airbrush compressor right now with salvaged parts. I designed pressure circuits for my day job. Wow, that sounds like a lot of work, but that's kind of cool. Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Do you need a moisture catch to plug an airbrush into a big air compressor? I have a 45-gallon for car work. So when I bought that, hardware store compressor, I had a moisture catch, but I almost never got any moisture out of it. And somebody told me it's because the that type of compressor, like a big, compressor with a big tank that you use for filling up tires or, nailing things or whatever, anyway, a garage style compressor like that. The moisture evidently has a tendency, at least this is what I was told, and you guys let me know if I'm wrong, but it would stay predominantly in the tank. I almost never got any moisture in my little moisture trap thing. It would stay in the tank. When I bought a regular airbrush compressor, which has no tank, mine is just like a thing, there's just no tank to it, so it doesn't run when I'm not pushing down on the button. And as soon as I start pushing down the button, it kind of goes burp, 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 and it works really well, and I like it a lot. But it has no tank. That one I do get moisture out of, especially if it's like a humid day in the middle of the summer. Obviously it's cooler in the basement, but it's still kind of humid sometimes down there. And I've gotten moisture out of that big time. Yeah. So a moisture trap, a lot of times, like my moisture trap is part of my pressure regulator. It's all one chunk, and it just like it's designed to like clamp onto the edge of your table, and then hose runs from your compressor to the regulator / moisture trap, and then and then there's a hose that runs to your airbrush. And the dial is for changing your PSI, but then the moisture trap thing has got like a button on the bottom, at least on mine. There's like a little glass or plastic chamber where you can see moisture filling up, and you push in on it, and then it basically shoots all the, I think it's water, I hope it's water. It shoots something out. I usually take a paper towel and like crumple up in my hand, and then I use that to push up on, and then it just kind of shoots all the fluid into the paper towel. But that helps to get it, because what you don't want is that fluid going down towards your airbrush and going into your paint, because then you're watering down your paint, unless it's oil, in which case you're oiling down your paint, which is super bad, I assume. I don't really know what that fluid is. I'm hoping it's just like air moisture, because it's compressing the air. That's what a compressor does, is it compresses the air from the room and then shoots it down the hose. And if there's a lot of moisture in the air from the room, then it's in there. So yeah, definitely if you've got a regular compressor, a regular airbrush compressor, you definitely need a moisture trap. The big type of compressor with a tank, I did not find moisture almost ever in it, but that I might have just been lucky, I guess. It's possible. Wub says, have you ever considered doing milliput / green stuff tutorials, or know of any good sources? I'm not great with sculpting green stuff. I did do a tutorial a while back about how to make super flat green stuff, when I did that one about my Necron flayed ones, and I wanted strips of like flayed skin and whatnot. Like that, I did a tutorial on about how to do that, and the kind of, I think, nicer way to do it. When I first started doing research about it, I was like finding people say, oh, you take saran wrap and you put olive oil or something like that, or KY jelly or whatever on it, so that the green stuff doesn't stick to the plastic. And then you roll over it and you peel it all apart. But then I'm like, well, now you got green stuff with lube on it or some sort. And that's problematic, because how's the paint going to stick to it? How's the primer going to stick to it? So I started thinking about, well, what else could I use? And then you watch that video, you'd find out that I was using baking parchment, and it worked out great. So that's one tutorial I've done. But otherwise, as far as sculpting, I'm not great at sculpting. So I'm not... Sam's done a little bit of sculpting stuff I think on my channel. So there's that too. But at Milliput, yeah, I should probably do a Milliput. I think a lot of people don't know about Milliput. I should probably do a tutorial at least explaining what it is and how you can use it and how it's different from green stuff and jazz like that. That's not a bad idea. Definitely. Wargaming Lobby says, exactly, the big tank in the compressor acts as a trap. See, that's what I was thinking. That's science. Now the question is, though, is like over time, does it just keep filling up with moisture until eventually your tank is full? Like I never found, but it was like a 2-gallon tank, so I suppose that's a long time. If you've got a 45-gallon tank, you'll probably never have to worry about it. But yeah. Wargaming Lobby does say, if you notice, you have a draining valve on the bottom of the tank itself. See, there you go. I never noticed that before my compressor, my like garage-style compressor died on me. It got to the point where it started getting louder and louder and louder, and it took longer and longer to run, and that's when I decided to finally actually buy a real airbrush compressor. But at the time, when I bought that garage-style compressor, I think I paid maybe $50-$60. It was pretty reasonable. Airbrush compressors can be a good deal more expensive, but you can also find cheap ones. Sometimes you get what you pay for, so there's that too. Tony asks, Uncle Adam, what are your thoughts on the new AdMech transport? If you haven't seen it, it's this kind of crazy sort of hover tank thing that the Adeptus Mechanicus got. They finally have a vehicle that they can move people around on the battlefield with, which they've never had before. I think at some point we got into a conversation. I don't remember where it was. It was either at TMX, Origins, or MiniWarGaming, but I got into a conversation with somebody about how it would be really funny instead to take the legs off of like an armature, which is also an AdMech, and actually just put that on the bottom of that hover tank, so it was like this weird sort of Baba Yaga sort of like walking tank thing with just skinny little legs moving along. I don't remember why we thought that was hysterical, but it was hysterical at the time. And I was like, I kind of want to do that, except that tank is like $80, and an armature is like, I'm like, I have no use for it, but it would be funny to watch. I could probably just Photoshop it, really. That might just scratch the itch right there. So yeah. Let's see here. People talking about airbrusher compression and stuff like that. Anthony B says, just picked up some metal minis and struggling to pick out the details. Any tips or tricks on metal minis? It's not even just metal minis. There's plenty of minis that sometimes that are resin or even plastic where those just like, what is the detail I'm looking at here? Although it's sometimes a little bit more tough with metal. Yeah, it's tough when there's not discernible real good texture, or not texture, detail in a sculpt. It can be very difficult to sort of figure that out. I personally find that one of the things that I do to kind of combat that is I have a tendency to paint everything kind of dirty and grungy, because I'm generally looking at it from the fact that they're on a battlefield and they shouldn't be that clean. I've just always done that. One of the big benefits to doing that is it allows you to sometimes paint quicker, and number two, you can cover up mistakes and just throw mud on it. You know what I mean? Like just paint like it's dirty. If that doesn't work for this particular situation, then you kind of have to try to wing it and try to paint it in there. But there's no good just like, and this is the technique for doing that. It's pretty much one-off. We'll see how it works. Yeah, it's problematic. And it's not all models. It's not all metal models that are like that. But every once in a while you get a metal model where you're like, I don't know what the detail is supposed to be here on this arm. Like, did the shirt end and then the skin started or not? Honestly, it seems as if in many situations, more often than not, because you're so focused on it and you're painting on it, you're thinking more about it than the person who sees it on the table later on. It's the same type of thing like in music. Like you're like up in front of a bunch of people doing a performance and you goofed up a note. Almost no one ever notices. You know what I mean? Like you noticed and you're like, oh man, I missed that note. But unless it's like a really super jarring, discordant tone, more often than not, or if it's a really, really well-known song, if it's not either of those things, then people didn't notice. So just it's the way it works. VJ Morph says that the talk of the chicken tank was at TMX. So yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. Possibly when we were hungover on Saturday morning. Yeah, I could see that. Let's see here. Sam says, been painting again for a year or so, but having trouble finding a way to get playing games again. Any tips? Tried the GameFor app, but to no avail. I mean, with GameFor, it kind of partially depends on where you are, but it also depends, too. What I've been doing with the GameFor app, and a lot of people have been doing, is not just using the game events where it shows the events near you, because sometimes there's just not stores near you or anything like that. Another thing is also the looking for players aspect of the GameFor app, and that is a place where you can post a little thing saying, hey, I'm looking to play this, Age of Sigmar or Kill Team or whatever, or Bolt Action or, Frostgrave. And these are the stores that are local to me where I will meet at and play, because you want to have a public place that you meet these people for the first time. And then people can send you messages through there. So you might have, users, GameFor users in your area, but the stores in your area might not be getting on board yet. So it doesn't look like there's many events nearby. But if you go to the looking for players section of GameFor, you can then go there and see people. And even if you don't see people, there might be still lurkers there who haven't posted anything yet. So if you post a thing saying, I'm looking to play this game or that game, you might have somebody that sends you a message and says, oh yeah, I'm also looking to play that game. Sometimes you need to take the first step to kind of post that thing and put it out there. You're not sharing your email, you're not sharing your phone number or your text number or anything like that. The messaging all happens through the app, so it's nice that way because you don't have to worry about, getting your information too far out there. People can just message you through the app. And if that person's a bad person and you don't want to talk to them, you can report them, you can block them. It's got all those features as well. But so far we haven't had really too many issues like that. And I've had plenty of people reach out to me and say, hey, I finally found people to play Age of Sigmar with in my local area because I used the looking for players portion of the GameFor app. Barring all of that, if you've got stores nearby, local, then you should probably talk to those stores, like go in there and find out what kind of games are popular there, what people are playing inside. If they don't have like tables to play at, if it's like a game store but it just mainly sells Magic, then that's not going to help you out. You can try using Google, you can try using Facebook. Both of those are problematic for trying to find gamers in your local area, which is why we started GameFor in the first place. If there's a club near you, that's another thing to look for as well. If not only can you do the looking for players thing in GameFor, but we also have club support. So there might be a club near you that plays and is in that club groups and clubs section in the menu, but if they may not post events too frequently, or maybe they have a lot of private events, but they're still looking for people to join the club. They just don't want just any old random person showing up. So there's a lot of different possibilities that way. Wargaming Lobby says, time to hit the hay, folks. Workday tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of stream. Have a good night. Absolutely. What else here? Randall says, I really need to check out Blitz Bowl. It looked like a lot of fun. Easy to get into. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that VJ and I got to play. And I actually want to redo my humans now because when I painted them and I did the bases as a very kind of grassy sort of thing, and I used some like static grass, and I really didn't like the way it turned out. Really not happy with it. And then it turns out, unlike regular Blood Bowl, which is almost always played like on a grass pitch, Blitz Bowl seems to be, at least in the artwork on the game and on the board, it looks like it's played almost like on dungeon tiles. So I'm like, well, heck, I would have known that. I would have just painted their bases to look like dungeon tiles. I would have thrown like some texture down and maybe some green stuff and whatever. So now I actually want to redo my humans and probably not break them off the base. That seems like a lot of work. I'd probably want to repaint them and then have like a nice dungeon tile texture in the bases. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So, what else have we got going on here? Let's see. I wish more people used GameFor in Australia. Well, we're going to be, towards the end of summer, we're going to be launching a new feature for GameFor. And what that's going to be is it's going to be something called badges. So, like you play Xbox or something like that, and you have the achievements that you get. Oh, and I think a PlayStation, they're called trophies. There's a lot of different apps that have badges. There's an app for beer drinkers called Untapped. And once you've checked into 5 bars, then you get this badge. And you've drunk 6 different IPAs, and you get that badge. And it's just like it's on your profile, so your friends on your friends list can look at it and go, oh, you've got that badge, I want to get that badge, or whatever. So we're going to be starting to do that, which in and of itself doesn't have a ton of value, but it's a sort of little fun extra feature. The thing that's really going to have value to that particular thing is there's one badge, well, technically 2, but that's a pair of badges, that you'll be able to potentially get. We're going to be adding in referral codes. So if you decide to sign up your friend and say, hey, you should join GameFor, and when you do, use my referral code, then when they sign up for GameFor and punch in your referral code, you'll get a badge saying, hey, you've got the recruitment badge for June 2019. And the person that you signed up, they also get a badge. They can only get one time. It's like because someone recruited them, you only get recruited once, but you can recruit multiple people. Anyway, both of you will then be entered into a contest for that month. And then if the pair of you get chosen, so like because I signed you up or whatever, then the both of us get chosen, then each of us would get a $50 gift card. That's what we're planning on right now. A $50 gift card to your local store. So we would contact you and say, what's your closest store? And then we would call them and then get you a gift card and you go pick it up and all that kind of stuff. So we're not having to ship you something, which can get really expensive. Also, we're not sending you a game you don't want to play or don't care about. We're sending you into your store to buy something that you want to buy and all that kind of stuff. And if you sign up 3 people or 4 people or 5 or 10 or 20, each of those is another potential winner for that month, and when it's every month. So what that's going to do is it's going to get people to sign their friends up because they're trying to win stuff. So that's coming by the end of summer is our plan to do that, and that's going to help, I think, grow things as well. But we've been growing over just the last couple of days because it just got announced by Gen Con that Gen Con is now using GameFor for their pop-up Gen Cons, which are these events that are going on during Gen Con, the 1st through the 4th of August. All across America, there's like 45 different stores where if you can't make it to Gen Con, you can instead go to the pop-up Gen Con. If you go to the pop-up Gen Con at the store that's doing it, then you get a special Gen Con badge, and they have Gen Con events, and there are certain games that are being released at Gen Con that you can only get at Gen Con, but you can also get them at these stores. So there's benefit to that if you're into that kind of stuff. So now, if you find a pop-up Gen Con event going on in the GameFor app, it'll have the pop-up Gen Con logo, and you can click through and find out more information about pop-up Gen Con, where the website is, all that kind of jazz. So they reached out to us and said, hey, we want to have our events listed in GameFor, so we feel real good about that. They've been talking about it now in their emails, to their email list. They've been posting about it on Facebook and stuff like that. We're releasing our press release Monday or Tuesday about the whole thing. So it's been this kind of partnership with Gen Con, which is also really helping, which is great. Anyway, Anthony B says, my liver hates Untapped. I've not used it, but a couple of guys in the office use it and really enjoy it. Terracotta 9 says, badges? We don't need no stinking badges. We figured they'll work out nice. Country Gaming of ND says, how is the app spelled? I can't find it. It's spelled GameFor, G-A-M-E-F-O-R, all one word. It's on the App Store through iOS, and it's also through the Google Play Android store. So, plus there's also a web page or a web. If you don't have a smartphone, there's also a web version, which is almost got as many features, but sometimes there's a couple of features that are not quite there yet. We're almost to parity with the website, but it's not exact. But yeah, you can still, at the very least, if you go to www.imgamefor.com. You can find it, and if you go to imgamefor.com/web, you can find the web version of it and stuff like that. Let's see if I can make this work. Loud keyboard, engage. imgamefor.com. Nope, spelled that wrong. And then you can go to that, and then if you just go to that/web, that takes you straight to the web interface. So, let me see here. What else have we got? Dave Rudin says, I just used my mate's airbrush for the first time last night, and the quality of the priming, the smooth finish and ease has really made me want one. Yeah, I honestly, if you've just started out painting, I'm not saying it's a requirement. Absolutely not. But if you get into it even a little bit more to an intermediary level, and you want to, and if you live in a place where, like me, there's a lot of times in the year you can't prime because it's outside is terrible, whether it's too humid, too hot, too cold, too windy, whatever, then an airbrush is really, really helpful, at the very least for priming. And then once you get used to priming with it, then you're going to see yourself starting to use the base coat color, because why not? Right? Why prime it all the airbrush and then go with a brush and paint on all the base coat color? If you're painting a military thing that's all roughly one color, or you're painting a Space Marine, Blood Angel, who's mostly red, well, why wouldn't you do the red? And then you start getting into, well, why don't I do the highlight now too, or whatever? And then it just kind of goes from there, and you kind of learn as you go along. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Let me see, what else have we got? Hi, Uncle Adam, just saying hi from the other side of the earth, Malaysia. Glad to be subscribing. Plenty of why didn't I try that moment every time I watch your videos. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that they're helping out. And hello to Malaysia. Let me see, what else here? Wubba-dub-dubs, wubba-wub, I have a really hard time with that, as you've noticed. I've never had issues priming rattle can unless it's raining. I mean, if it's like really cold, you can do it. You have to, well, A, if it's really cold, you don't want to stand outside too long. I've seen people in really cold weather use primer, but more often than not, they're usually warming up the can. They're like keeping it in the house, keeping it sometimes in a bowl of warm water, that kind of thing. But to get best results, there are definitely parameters that you want to stay within certain humidity, certain temperature, stuff like that. So there's that. That's definitely a thing. Yeah. So it's and it also depends on the paint. Like some some rattle can primers work better than others. Sometimes you might have a can of stuff that works really well for you almost all the time, but this can doesn't work very well, and it turns out it's because you bought it from a shop that's been sitting on it for like 2 years. Rattle can primer over time can also get lousy. Like if you've had that same can of primer for a really long time, it can just get bad and not work very well, like in the can. So you kind of have to be cognizant of that stuff too. I have a tendency to, especially when I was still using dull coat a lot, I would, as soon as I bought a can of dull coat and brought it home, I would take out a Sharpie and write the date on it that I knew I bought it. So I don't pick up a can and go, yeah, this should be good. And it turns out it's like 4 years old or something like that. So I always write the dates on that. I don't generally do it as much with primers because I go through a bit more primer sometimes. Although now I also prime a lot. That does not happen, I don't think. I've never come across it with airbrush primers. They can sit for a long time. And varnish, because I'm mostly varnishing now with my airbrush, it's not as big of a problem either. So, let's see here. Do you see any historic gaming going on at the cons? I'm into bolt action and black powder type games. Depending on the con, yeah. I mean, like I know at the LVO, Las Vegas Open this year, I saw a lot of not black powder, but bolt action. There was a bunch of bolt action going on. There was Flames of War going on. Might have been Team Yankee as well. And then at let's see, at Adepticon, there's definitely bolt action and Flames of War and things like that. I mean, the 40K and the X-Wing and the Shadespire and all that kind of stuff has a tendency, there's more of it generally. But there is still, decent amounts of people playing those games at those types of conventions. There was some historical, like, again, World War II stuff. There was some historical World War II stuff at Origins as well, but not a ton. There was maybe 8 tables that I remember they were having like a tournament kind of a thing, and I'm pretty sure they were playing it was either Flames of War or it was bolt action. There was a bunch of Dust 1947 going on too, but that's not technically historical since there are Cthulhu's in it and werewolves and laser tanks. But it's kind of historical. It's close-ish. So yeah, there's that. What else? At Gen Con, you'll see some as well too. You'll see some, like, maybe sometimes you'll even see like big naval battles. There was a bunch of Wings of War / Wings of Glory, which that's historical. I mean, it's not what a lot of historical gamers think of as being historical necessarily because of the style of the game, but it's still World War I planes fighting, and that was really cool. They had some of the big bombers too. They're like a foot wide. That was neat. There was a lot of people playing that game. There's like a dozen or more people sitting around the table playing a big kind of furball of World War I fighters and stuff like that. Tyler Tinsley says, I just recently started to mass miniatures for airbrushing with some silly putty. It's amazing to get multiple airbrush colors on miniature. Yeah, silly putty is an amazing thing, and it's definitely something that most airbrushers, unless you're just priming, then you don't need it. But if you're trying to do other types of things and you want to be able to have like some colors here and some colors there without getting those colors on the other colors, silly putty is a great way to go, and I want to make a video about it soon, actually. I was just using it on some models recently. People talking about pink and blue insulation foam for making terrain. Yeah, so the thing is about that pink foam or blue foam, or sometimes it's light green, there are some parts of the world where they don't sell it because you don't insulate your homes the same way, or if at all. If you live in a place that's pretty warm, you might not have to do that. Like here, any hobby store I go, not hobby store, any hardware store I go into, I'm gonna be able to find that pink foam and then be able to make terrain out of it. Excuse me, but not everybody can find that in their neck of the woods. So in some places it's not as easy. But that stuff is really good for building certain types of terrain. It's like not like the same like white styrofoam stuff where it's got a little beads in it. It's much finer cell and sturdier, I think, too. So yeah, it works out really nice for terrain. VJ Morph says, by the way, for those interested, Tabletop Simulator is currently on sale on Steam for 50% off. Tabletop Simulator is a game where you can play tabletop type games in a video game style, like on your computer with people. And there's lots of board games that are in there that you can play and things like that, you know. But there's also a lot of people who've made like mods and add-ons where if you want to play X-Wing, they've got like little X-Wings modeled in 3D, and then you can play, or you can play 40K. There's lots of different types of games. There's a lot of different add-ons for different types of games. More popular, the more possible you're going to find those. But yeah, it's like and you can spin the table around and look at it from different angles and all that kind of stuff and everything. Yeah, I think you can even roll the dice in the game and they'll bounce along and all that stuff. Sometimes you roll a dice and you hit your models and knock them over like in the real world, and then your friends get mad like in the real world, and that's fun. But yeah, it's 50% off right now. I think big Steam sale is going on for the summer right now. Kenneth says that Little Wars is great and has been going on for years. Yeah, there are some historical only conventions as well. There's actually one that's quite close to where I live that's real small, but still it's mostly historical, and that one happens always in the very early part of January. It's called TundraCon. It's in Appleton, Wisconsin, and that is predominantly all, you know, there's like every once in a while it's like someone brings like some X-Wing and like does some demos, but otherwise it's mostly Flames of War and bolt action and other World War II style stuff and things like that, and even some like Napoleonics and things like that. But yeah, it's not a requirement. Like if you want to come and run something different, that's great. But generally, that's what that group who runs everything, they all kind of stick a little bit more on the historical side for that convention. Two Heads Talking says, what is silly putty? This seems like a modern American thing in the airbrush world. Silly putty's been around for years and years and years. It's kind of a kid's toy. You can get it like at, I don't know, toy stores, grocery stores, dollar stores, whatever. And it comes like, for some reason, in a little plastic egg, and you pop the egg apart, and then it's this pinkish putty. And you can stretch it and do stuff with it, and kids, I guess, play with it in some fashion or whatever. But what it's really useful for, although it's not what it's sold for, is for masking, like for airbrush. Like you want to like get airbrush on everything except for the guy's head, and you can take some silly putty, and it's not sticky per se, not like poster putty, but you can put it on there. It'll stay, but it's not as sticky as poster putty. I've had poster putty, if it stays on there a little too long, can actually pull off a little bit of paint sometimes, but only if like my primer was messed up or something. Like if your paint is usually pretty well on there, the poster putty's not going to pull it off. But silly putty is much less sticky, if sticky at all. Like if you take silly putty and stick it to the wall, it'll stay for a little while, but eventually it'll probably fall off, maybe like overnight. So it's not something you want to stick up posters with, like poster putty, or blue tack, as a lot of people also call it. Anyway, silly putty is great stuff. You should be able to get it online, I would assume, like Amazon or whatever, if you can't get it at a local place near you. And it just works really well for masking things, because you can kind of squish it down into all the little nooks and crannies and say, I don't want any airbrush paint or whatever going here, and then you can spray and you peel it away, and then you're fine. So like I said, I'm going to do a video about silly putty soon. There are companies out there that will sell masking putty, which is basically just like a different color of silly putty, but it's basically silly putty, except they just sell it for super crazy expensive. There are maybe some other features to it that is whatever, but silly putty works really well, I think, for that type of thing. John Caspian. Hey, John. How you doing? John Caspian says that Tabletop Simulator also supports VR, so you can play at room scale. Yeah, if you've got a cool headset and all that stuff, you can do that stuff too. I've seen some videos of people doing that as well. But if you don't have the VR, it still works as well. Yeah. Ashen Seeker says, I really have a hard time deciding whether buying an airbrush or no. On one side, I hear people on the web pro airbrush. On the other side, my store manager advised against it, and he has them in the store. I don't know why you would advise against airbrush. If you were like, I would say it's not something that if you've just started painting, it is not a requirement. It is not something you want to do right away. Once you've been painting for a little while even, and you just want to prime things quicker, with wasting less paint and stuff like that, then I think airbrush is a really good thing. You admittedly want to have a space for it, it's not like you don't want to do it in the living room. Let's just say that. Generally, they do make like vents, or not vents. It's like a box thing. Like I don't know. It's a hood. It's like a venting hood that you can buy. I've seen them on Amazon for $90 to $100, and then it's got a fan built in and a filter and a light and all that stuff. So you plug it in, and then as you airbrush like in it kind of, and then it sucks all the particulate matter. Because with airbrush, if you're using a compressor, there's no fumes per se, because there's not a propellant. The propellant is just compressed air, so it doesn't smell weird necessarily, but there are little particles of paint floating around and all that kind of stuff. So you don't want those to go up in your nose. That's why you wear generally a mask with that kind of stuff. But you also don't want it to just settle on all of your furniture and stuff like that for the most part. Now, I do my airbrushing in a little room underneath the stairs in the basement, so it's not as big of a deal. Every once in a while, I just wipe things down and it's fine. But if your hobbying is like, oh, I get to hobby on the dining room table, when I pull up my stuff out of the closet and set it up, then airbrushing is a little bit harder, admittedly. But if you just get one of those little, vent fan hood things, that can help a lot. You just gotta put it near a window, and there's a little hose, and you can kind of stick it out the window and turn it on, and you'll be fine. Some people say airbrushing is cheating, and I say that that's crap. If airbrushing is cheating, then using a brush is cheating. You should just be painting with sticks you find outside. You know what I mean? It's like, it's another tool. Sometimes you're only just using it for priming. You know what I mean? And you can use that for years until you actually get into base coating. There's no reason to. I mean, you can go into base coating right away. Honestly, I like to use a lot of different colored primers now, where I can basically prime and base coat in one step, which saves me a step. I'm always looking at ways to save steps. So yeah. It's something to definitely look into. Wubda Wubwub says, would you use silly putty over using tape? It honestly depends on if I'm trying to make straight lines, I would not use silly putty, because silly putty you can't really make a straight line with silly putty very easily. But if you're trying to make to mask off organic stuff, or mask off I need to mask off this section. I've done it in the past where if you look at Uncle Tickles, who's in the bottom of every one of my intros of my normal videos where you see the different models, Uncle Tickles is down there. He's a red Chaos Terminator Lord, and he's got lightning claws on both hands. I painted him all up, and then the very last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to make a white fade on the sky blue kind of lightning claws. And I was like, well, how am I going to get airbrush on just the claws and not on the rest of Uncle Tickles? Well, as it turns out, you just cover him completely, the front side of him all completely in silly putty, with just the claws sticking out, poking through the silly putty, and then you can spray, and then it's fine. And that's how. So it's good for stuff like that. But yeah, I wouldn't try to make a straight line with it. That would be really hard. J Tick says, 30 days, my man. The countdown is getting scary. I'm not scared. I mean, I've been to Gen Con before. You've been to Gen Con before. J-Tick and I and a bunch of other guys are the guys. We're going to Gen Con, so we're really looking forward to it. It's a great time. It really is. If you get the chance, it's really a good idea to try to get to Gen Con at some point in your life if you can. Especially if you like something other than just wargaming. If you're only into tabletop wargaming, I would tell you it's maybe a better idea to try to get to Adepticon. It's easier, first of all. It's only 5,000 people instead of 60,000 people. But Adepticon, if you really only like wargaming, then Adepticon's probably your better bet. But if you like wargaming, but you're also into board gaming, or you're also into RPGs, or you're also into collectible card games, or you're whatever, then Gen Con's the way to go. Absolutely, at least once. Make a pilgrimage and do it. Yeah. Let me see here. Thanos73 says your store manager wants to sell you rattle can primers. Probably. That's potential as well. That's very true. Because the primers, the special primers that you're getting actually from the companies, the actual paint companies now, as opposed to Krylon or Valspar or any of those other kind of more hardware store type colors, those rattle cans are getting expensive. You know what I mean? So if I can get you to buy $20 rattle cans versus getting you to buy a little bottle of airbrush primer, I can understand that. So yeah. Vanguard says, painting with sticks? Look at Mr. Fancy Pants over here, everyone. Yes, exactly. That's the exact same attitude. I was just thinking to myself, man, the camera hasn't crapped out in a little bit, and then it did. Well, that's back at least. I didn't have to do anything. And we're getting close to the end. Yeah, we got about 10 minutes left. Country Gaming of ND says, real men use their fingers. That's how you paint. Yeah, I use my fingers more for an eraser. Like every once in a while you get like a little bit of extra like wash or something and you're like, oops, that's not the right spot. And you just kind of rub it off real quick. And if you do it while it's still wet, you don't almost ever notice it. DTM Jax says, I've been airbrushing for several years, use it mostly for scale modeling. I find myself using a brush 90% of my miniature hobby, though it still has its uses. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I want to be very clear. You use the airbrush a lot of times to prime, base color, like let's say you're painting a tank. It's really easy to paint it green with an airbrush, that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to like models, let's say I'm painting, I don't know, ultramarines. So I'm either going to use a black primer with my airbrush and then spray blue, or I'm just going to use a blue airbrush primer if I can find one that I like. And then maybe I want to do a little bit of a highlight. So they're like, it's mostly like more of a normal or darker or mid blue, not navy, but like a mid blue. And then I use another color of airbrush that's maybe just a little bit lighter blue than that, and I spray from above. I'm holding my model thusly, and I'm spraying from above with a lighter blue. So now it sort of fades from like slightly lighter blue to the normal darker blue. So that can immediately look like you've gone through and done a bunch of wet blending and you just sprayed blue and then lighter blue from above. And that's easy. Now, if you want to go in and say, well, I'm going to try to do a little bit of highlight here, a little bit of highlight there, you can do that as you get more advanced. But for me, most times it's prime and then a base coat and highlight. Or if I can base coat and base coat and prime in one step, I'll do that and then a little bit of highlight. And then everything else after that is predominantly me with a brush. So it's the start, and it gives you a really nice smooth base coat, a smooth primer. It's easy to get into all the little nooks and crannies. But it is the first 10, 20%, depending on how you paint, of the job. And the rest of it is done with a brush. There are people out there who will tell you that they can even do eyeballs with an airbrush. And I'm like, well, that sounds like a pain, and I don't want to do it. So I don't paint eyeballs anyway. But yeah, I don't get super, super crazy detail. People can, and that's great. People can paint however they want. They should. But for the most part, when we're talking about airbrush, we're not talking about, and then you're going to paint the bolter with the airbrush, and then you're going to paint this guy's shoe with the airbrush. No, you're going to generally do the big block out main colors. You're going to do your primer before that, and maybe you do that white and black kind of zenithal highlighting, and then you go over it with a bunch of glazes and stuff like that. But the majority of it is still going to be brush. So, regular paintbrush. JP Got Rocket says, I highly recommend Adepticon over Gen Con and Origins, though. Again, like I said, if you don't like big crowds, then Origins and Gen Con are not great. If you don't really play anything but war games, then I would tell you Adepticon over those other two as well. Yeah. Tigsy says, where is Gen Con and how much is it again? Gen Con is in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's coming up the 1st through the 4th of August, and I forget how much it costs. I get a media badge because I'm fancy, and so so it's like a press badge thing. But it's not cheap. It's easily, I don't know, if you want to get like a 4-day badge, I think they cost, I don't know, $100, $120, something like that. But I think that most of the badges are sold out for this year. I haven't been paying super close attention, but I know they're getting close at least. Yeah. Is that zenithal priming? Have you done it with contrast? I haven't. I've seen people doing it with contrast. I've got a friend who's a commission painter named Josh for Warstein Studios. And Warstein Studio, he did a bunch of orcs, and I think he posted a bunch of them on the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club, where he basically primed in like a brown color, like maybe the Krylon like camo dark brown, but he used some sort of brown color, and then he sprayed white. So now you've got this fade from like white to like dark brown in like the recesses, but it was mostly white with not that much dark brown left over. And then did his contrast paints over the top of that. He painted a bunch of orcs, and they look good. And so yeah, you can do it because of the nature of the contrast paints. They are very transparent. So the primer is super important. In a lot of other paints, the primer is important as a surface, but it's maybe not as important as a color because you're putting so much of whatever the base color on over the top of it. But because you are using the contrast paints as your base color, and because they are very transparent, then the color underneath is super important because it just shows through so much. So, but yeah, I have seen some zenithal highlighting along with the transparent, contrast paint, and it works out. It can work out nicely. If he hadn't put so much white over that dark brown, it would not have worked out as well, probably. Depends on the model again. If you're looking to make something real grungy, or if you're painting tree people, well, then you can have a little bit of a darker, thing going on, and then throw some of the brown contrast paints over it, and it will give it a better look and a little darker look. But if you're trying to have something that's got a cooler color, like orc skin is generally green, then you need to have a little bit more of the white underneath that green contrast you put over it to make it really be able to see, the color through it. That's kind of the way it works. Let me see here. Adron says, for Ultramarines, black primer, then Macrage blue. Probably pronounced Macrage wrong. And then I've settled on Calidor Sky for layer and airbrush highlight. Then it's all brushwork, edge highlights, details, bases, etc. You could also potentially, two birds, one stone, instead of using black primer and then Macrage blue, you could use, I know that they make, Vallejo makes basically a blue primer, airbrush primer. So you could start with that. And then maybe just do a little anti-zenithal if you want to get it real dark underneath there. So there's options there. I'm always looking well, how can I cut off another step? You know what I mean? But still make it look the same or pretty close to the same. So yeah, but that type of thing, you're doing the black primer airbrush, Macrage blue airbrush, Calidor Sky for airbrush highlight, and then after that it's edge highlights, details, bases, etc. And that's all with a brush. So yeah. I'd like a laser-sighted airbrush. It would be heavy-ish, but that's not a half bad idea. There are times when I feel as if I'm pointing in the right spot with my airbrush, and then the dot goes a little bit not where I thought it was gonna. But that's why I don't usually do really super fine detail. I use it more for I need to cover this in this color, and then it doesn't matter as much. But if you were doing super fine detail, then you want to make sure you know exactly where that is going to land when you do. And a laser pointer would be super cool, but I don't know how that would work. It would be interesting though. Yeah. DTM Jack says, yeah, I use washes for the eyes. No Google eyes for me. No, yeah, same here. I just throw a wash in the eye sockets and let it call it a day. If you were looking at me from 50 feet away, you wouldn't see the whites of my eyes. I'm kind of squinty as it is, obviously. But even, your average person with average eyes, you're still, from that distance, you're barely going to see whites of the eyes generally. So I just, yeah. Sometimes, if you're really good at it, awesome. But honestly, it's, not always. Let me see. Someone else talking about an airbrush with frickin' laser beams attached to it. Yeah, that's a Kickstarter for somebody right there, I'm sure. What else? I drove through Gary, Indiana on my way to Chicago. Doesn't seem like a nice place. I don't know that I've been to. Well, when I was a kid, I went to Gary, Indiana once when we were going to Florida. But otherwise, I don't think I've been through there recently. Unless it's, do we go through there when we go to Indianapolis? I don't know. I'm not really. I just follow what the GPS lady tells me generally, so I don't really know where I am at any given time until I get to where I'm going, which just made my wife chuckle because it's true. Tigsy J says, hey, I've only been playing a month and I have about 2,500 points of Stormcast Eternals. Wow, that's a lot in a month. Can anyone give me tips on painting or playing or even a cool color scheme? That's a lot of questions right there, as it turns out. And the show's about to end, as it turns out, as well. I would tell you to do some good YouTube research on, for color schemes, you can find that information in the books, but you probably find it on the internet as well. There's a lot of different color schemes. You can certainly make up your own, but there are a bunch of example ones in the current, I think, Stormcast Battle Tome. That's a place to go look. So if either you've got one or if you've got a friend who's got one, you can borrow it, take a look at it. As far as tips on painting and playing, YouTube is the place. That's if you can't find it on my channel, there's a lot of stuff out there. You can find it someplace, but definitely do some searches on YouTube. You can find a lot of information about that. VJ Morph says, did you find out when you're getting your chain axe? No, I haven't got my chain axe yet. I'm hoping it shows up this week. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to try to give them a call or something and say, hey, where's my chain axe? But it didn't show up yet. I mean, it's big. Maybe it's hard to pack, but I still, they should be sending it pretty soon. Rodney Hedger says, I started airbrushing after buying a cheap set from Aldi on clearance, but since then I've upgraded to a better airbrush that costs the same as the set. So yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world to start with an inexpensive one, especially if you're just basically using it for priming or something like that. And then if you upgrade to something better, then I would still hold on to the old brush, because I like to have two separate brushes. I like to have one for my normal painting, and I like to have a separate one for my varnish, because then I feel like I'm not going to cross-contaminate varnish stuff into the one brush or vice versa. So I just like to do that. It's also quicker sometimes just to be able to switch brushes then, as opposed to having to completely clean out the brush and then put in varnish. If you don't want the varnish to have a color attached to it. That's the other thing too. If you've never put regular paint into your varnish brush, then you never have to worry about it changing color on you, the varnish. So that's, I think, important. So, yeah. Well, there we go. It's 11 o'clock, at least in my neck of the woods. So I again thank everybody for coming and watching the show, even though there were camera issues on and off. They got a little better towards the end, but then I don't know. Probably as I'm talking, this is going to freeze up again. We'll probably see how that works out. I'm going to look into trying to see if I can figure out how to fix that in time for the next week's show, or next 2 weeks' show. But yeah, so again, thanks for coming and checking it out. I hope you had a good time, and I hope that everybody gets to do some painting. I hope everybody gets to travel if they want to, but not travel if they don't want to. And for those of you that I came across, hopefully in my travels and in my events the last 3 weeks, I hope that you're all doing well. And I thank you for coming over to talk to me and hanging out. And I appreciate you guys coming here to listen to me yammer on and fight the camera and keep fighting the good fight. So we'll see you in 2 weeks on the Every Other Sunday show, and where we'll talk about something else probably. But get some hobbying done and have a good day.